Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Carol Dahl. I'm Executive Director at the Lemelson Foundation, and I'm so pleased, as are all of us at the Lemelson Foundation, to have you here today to join us in celebrating 20 years of work to improve lives through invention. So much has happened since the foundation was started by Dorothy and Jerome Lemelson 20 years ago. And Jerome Lemelson, I'm just going to say, everybody called him Jerry. So if you hear us going between, that's because everyone called him Jerry. But so much has happened. We hope today, over the course of the day, you'll get a window into the birth of the foundation, Jerry Lemelson's vision for creating a next generation of inventors, that you'll also get a window into the importance of inspiring and educating a next generation of inventors and how we create an ecosystem to ensure that they can take their ideas into products that can have impact. We also are really thrilled to have with us today a variety of people from around the country, and I'll get to that in a minute. We'll turn today to also talk about the ecosystem that's needed to turn inventions into products and how they reach people around the world in terms of having positive impact, even those who are the poorest populations of the world. This is an exciting day for us to have all of you here joining us. We have speakers from around the world that you'll be hearing over the course of the day of all ages and maturity in terms of the work they're doing. And among those are some inventors who will be speaking to you during the course of the day, as well as you may have seen outside exhibiting their inventions. We have so many wonderful inventors and programs and projects that have been involved with the foundation that we also will have some slideshows running. I can tell you that there are so many folks here today that have done amazing work. And we can't, in the possibility of one day, show everything from every project that we've supported or every inventor that has touched our work. And so we also encourage you to reach out and meet not only the exhibitors who are out there today, but also others who you don't know, because I guarantee you, you will meet somebody extraordinary and learn something fascinating. So as we move into the day, I want to also encourage you to engage with the staff of the foundation. The staff will serve as your guides throughout the day. They will be introducing you to the panelists and the speakers over the course of the day. They will also be helping you meet others during the day out in the halls and during the breaks. They're wearing these red lanyards, so if anybody has a red one on, you know that that's a staff member from the foundation. I also want to draw your attention to the inventor's notebook you were given. You'll see inside, and you'll probably hear references to Jerry Lemelson's inventions and the notebook he kept with him at all times. We wanted to have you be part of the invention process and have a notebook in hand. The pen you were given is not just a pen, but there's actually a drive in it. And on the drive, you'll see that there are a number of products from the foundation's work and also highlights of various inventors and programs we've been working with. So I urge you today to explore, to enjoy, and to definitely reach out to others here, because it is an amazing collection of inventors, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. So right now, I'm very excited to introduce you to the first session we're having today. The first session is going to focus on the birth of the Lemelson Foundation and Jerry Lemelson's vision. And we are pleased to have not only family members here who will be sharing that vision with you and a bit of the history of the foundation and the evolution over time, but also a couple of key partners who have been part of that origin for the foundation. We're extraordinarily lucky to have with us today both Dorothy Lemelson, one of our founders, and also the chair of our board at the Lemelson Foundation, as well as Jerome and Dorothy's son, Robert, who is here today and will be sharing some personal reflections on the foundation. Unfortunately, Eric Lemelson has had to stay back home. We had hoped he'd be here today, but his son got sick at the last minute, and so they weren't able to travel. So unfortunately, he's not here with us today. So during this first session, as I said, you're going to hear a bit about the origin of the foundation. You're going to get a sense of Jerry Lemelson's vision of the future pipeline of inventors, and a bit about family reflections on the birth and origin and evolution of the foundation. And I'm extraordinarily honored to invite Robert Lemelson to the stage.
Thanks, Carol. Well, great to be here. It's like old friends and new. I mean, one of the joys of having a foundation is building long-term relationships with a variety of people. And we've come a really long way. Actually, today I'm going to talk mostly about the past, not about the future, about the origins of the foundation. So the year was 1993. For my dad, it was a year of turmoil and triumph. He had successfully licensed his flexible manufacturing system to the entire Japanese and European auto industry. But it was a rough year for him. He had gotten some bad press, and things weren't it was to be an independent inventor at that time, trying to license your inventions was difficult. So my brother and I took a walk with him to kind of calm him down, and he started kind of reflecting on his past, on his childhood. My dad was grew up in the 20s and 30s, where aeronautics was the future, was the openness of flight, and he spent hours building, like a lot of kids at that time, balsa wood and tissue paper airplanes, which he made in competitions. He actually opened a business. In fact, one of his first inventions when he was 12 or 13 was he created a plane that had a fixed wing that you could either fly on the high position or low position, and you could just switch the wing around. And no one had made it to that point, and in fact, no one had probably made it since. So that kind of dream of flight led to him joining the Air Force, where he talked at that meeting in the park about working with African American engineers and the kind of horrors of Jim Crow, which led him to a lifelong interest in civil rights, and also in a desire to create an America where everyone was free to reach their potential. And he talked most particularly about his cultural heroes, people like the Wright brothers, obviously, Alexander Graham Bell, and most particularly Thomas Edison. In fact, we moved to Metuchen, New Jersey, which is basically a town surrounded by Edison, New Jersey. So we're literally in the heart of American invention. So he believed that American inventors and innovation were part of American success and American exceptionalism. And he used to talk that if you look back at the last century and a half from the 90s, something like 90% of the great inventions came from the minds of American inventors. You look around then, television, radio, cassettes, vinyl records, automobile, all American inventions. So he really believed that American economic growth and future depended on supporting inventors, invention, innovation. But he's also worried. He's worried about the world and about our America slipping away. At that point, there were these global economic struggles, kind of this head-to-head zero-sum game with the Japanese, this corporatization, multilateral corporatization that he felt was at times strangling the aspirations of aspiring inventors and innovators. And then he also saw children, young people, kind of turning their focus away from what he felt should be the heroes, which are scientists, inventors, engineers, worshiping movie stars, pop rock stars, etc. And inventors and scientists seemed to be disappearing as heroes from the popular cultural imagination. And he got quite upset. He saw his cultural heroes disappearing, so my brother and I quoted our cultural hero, Spider-Man, who said, with great resources come great responsibility, as paraphrase. So that was kind of the origin, non-apocryphal origin of the Lemelson Foundation, driven by some of his core values, which were hard work. I mean, Jerry worked 16 hours a day, every day, inventing. The one place he was at most at peace was when he was inventing. That was he really kind of lucked out in however the genetics, biology worked here, and the best space he was in is when he was inventing. This kind of nonstop production of ideas. He also believed that to fight no matter what the odds, and his battles were as an individual inventor, he took, based on the power of his ideas, the world's largest corporations, and won. I think that's a testament to that. He also believed that no one could tell you no, and to never give up, stand up for the little guy. And that was combined with a real sense of generosity and giving back to the country that he loved, with this kind of, people who knew Jerry knew he was very kind of childlike and had this sense of continuous learning and kind of having very big dreams. And so what we're here to celebrate is certainly one of our biggest dreams as a foundation. And these have been remarkable years. We've seen invention and innovation go from this neglected and even marginalized status to a recognition of the centrality of inventors, innovation, and entrepreneurship in creating a productive, forward-looking, compassionate, and free society. And our focus on impact inventing, which wasn't really there at the beginning, inventing to create a better, healthier, and more prosperous society where imagination can soar like the airplanes my father so loved. So now I'd like to introduce my mom, Dorothy Lemelson, who at 89 is as dedicated, sharp, critical, but most importantly for us as a leader of the foundation, fun, as she was when we started the foundation. So what we're going to do now is have a panel about kind of the history of the foundation with my mom. Come on up, Dorothy. You can sit down. And Jerry Hosier, who was my dad's business partner and attorney, and it really understood more than I think almost anyone Jerry's his achievements, and Art Malella. This is what's really, Art is a very close friend. We had this retirement party recently, but it was 20 really great years. So this is going to be a really wonderful panel. So please. You can sit back there. So Mom, maybe you could just talk a little bit about Jerry. You said leave it open, so.
You don't want to know the most intimate details, so I'm not telling you. But from the moment I met Jerry, it was apparent that he was focused, and he was focused on creation and invention, and that was his passion, and that was his passion that lasted all his entire life. When we were first married, we lived in a small apartment, and there was a third little bedroom. It was most probably 6 foot wide, and he had the bedroom to work in. And then when we had our first house, he worked in the attic. And it was a very nice attic. It had windows on all sides except one, the entry. And he was able to ensconce himself up there with everything that he needed to work on his work and be comfortable and to be away from any distraction. So life with Jerry was him upstairs in the attic and coming down for meals and going to bed at night, but essentially he spent his whole time working. And I understood that because I worked also. And someone did say to me that if I stopped working, Jerry might get a job. So you can thank me for the fact that I continued to work. And Jerry never got a job, and he was always working.
So for Jerry, what was Jerry Lemelson like? What do you think drove or motivated him?
Well, I first met Dolly and Jerry in Philadelphia in early 1986. They had been referred to me by another lawyer in Chicago who didn't do the contingent fee kind of work that I did. And I knew nothing about them at the time I first met them. But it was in a Holiday Inn for lunch in early 1986. I happened to be in Philadelphia on another matter. They were there. And I just remember them being such a delightful couple. And Jerry was unfailingly polite, modest. He was just a very attractive kind of human being to be around and with Dolly. What beneath that calmness was an intensity and a drive. And inventing was his heart and soul. He couldn't turn it off like we can't turn off eating, he couldn't help himself. It wasn't a question of he felt he had to go to work. It was bred into him. And I'm always reminded of the Steve Jobs quote that Apple somewhat made famous in ads. You know, here's to the crazy ones, the rebels, the troublemakers, the square pegs in the round holes, the people who are the innovators, who are the creators. They have to have that kind of passion. And he certainly did. And I always remember, just as Dolly said, if Dolly quit working, maybe Jerry'd get a job. I don't think so. It was just in his nature.
We would have starved.
So Art, maybe you could talk about a couple of things two things. When you first met Jerry, but also what kind of was the context like in terms of how independent inventors fit into American society during that period, and how that was perhaps somewhat different from before and afterwards, and how Jerry fit into that.
Sure. First of all, it's great to see everybody here, so many old friends here today. It's really wonderful. When Jerry approached us, and actually as advanced people approached us, he wasn't on the radar. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons I think he came to the Smithsonian. But then you soon realized that here was a man, as you explained at the beginning, he was just been part of history of invention in the 20th century. He lived that life. And he had just come through finally with his some of the main victories and patents, so he suddenly emerged on the scene. But then you start looking at this, and it was just a wonderful marriage with the kinds of things we had at this museum, the history of invention, and this man that was there in the 30s and at the time of really great invention in the world, not just in America. And so he was very conscious of the role of the inventor when he came to us, because he had lived through it, and he was part of it. And he had this idea of a trajectory of invention that we had 19th century, the heroes that he remembered best, Bell and Morse, Edison, the big three. And then it became an era of corporate invention in the great research labs. He had nothing against these, but he felt that there was something submerged in the inventors' lot in that period. And when he came to the scene, it was really a time when individuals are suddenly coming to the fore again, especially in the digital realm and biotech realm. Suddenly you heard the individual names again. It was not a sort of level scene anymore. And he saw the emergence, I think, of another heroic age of invention. Indeed, if you kind of looked at the U.S. in the 70s, and there's a lot of pessimism about the U.S. place in the innovation, all of that, and then suddenly you had this, and people were writing off America in many ways in that period with inflation and all those things. And he suddenly, if you looked at it by the 90s when he came, it had changed. And America had done a lot of good things, but Jerry was still concerned about keeping it going when he approached us. And he had a special position for the independent inventor. He was a great hero for the independent inventors, and he was all about educating people to that and carrying on this tradition. I think he saw another golden age happening. Now for us, it was just a thrill to have this happen, to come here, because it really matched our museum in so many terrific ways. And just say one more thing about that we were at a time at the museum when it seemed like science and technology collections, we had the best collections in the world for this, but it seems like they were not as prominent as they once were. We were losing curatorial staff, and so there was a concern about how it was going to survive at the museum, and Jerry just represented this wonderful conjunction of coming with these resources. I mean, when he gave that gift, when Jerry and Dolly gave that gift, it was a humongous gift for the Smithsonian. It just changed everything. So it was, I think, just a nice marriage at that time, perfect marriage at that time. And I happened to be right there, so it was great.
And now we'll come back also to talk about the progression and development of the center at the Smithsonian.
Sure.
Ask my mom. So there has been this change over the years, where I think in the early days, we were very interested in invention for invention's sake. And the purpose of the prize program at MIT was to elevate inventors to kind of really this status of this heroic status. But we've kind of changed towards invention improving the lives as kind of impact invention in the U.S. and the developing world. And I don't know, Mom, do you want to talk about how that change came about 10 years ago and what the impetus was for moving towards the developing world?
Well, I think it was the progression of the way people felt in this country, that we had a responsibility for something beyond what we were experiencing, but what people in other countries were not experiencing, and we wanted to share that knowledge with them. And so Jerry became interested, and he never stopped to just think about something. He always had to act. So he acted, and that's how it all developed.
For Jerry, what were my dad's views on the role of the independent inventor, and particularly the inventor vis-a-vis the patent system?
Well, maybe let me preface that by saying your dad was a pure inventor. And by that I mean he was well-read in everything you could think of. He had an enormous breadth of knowledge across multiple disciplines. They say that cross-disciplinary invention is, one of the fertile areas, and it certainly is. But as one individual, he was, in effect, a group of independent people with interdisciplinary knowledge. And many inventors would go off and come up with one idea, spend a great deal of their life then trying to develop it to some commercial standard. Many inventors have to go off and become something they're not, businessmen. And it's very often unsuccessful with a lot of inventors. And it's unfortunate in the patent system that you cannot be purely an inventor and not encounter a lot of obstacles. One of the unfortunate things about the way the patent system works is that what you're rewarded with after finding that you have an invention is this certificate that gives you the right to go sue someone if they don't want to be cooperative and work with you. It's a horrible outcome, particularly when you have large corporations that have the balance of power. And for many decades, there was no opportunity for an inventor to license large companies. There's the famous windshield wiper case that was made into a movie, how this person that ultimately almost committed suicide because of his failings. Armstrong, the inventor of FM stereo, was so beaten down by RCA that he jumped out of a window in New York and committed suicide. There's got to be a better way for inventors to be able to move forward and get just reward. In part, it should be the large corporations, the Googles and all that spend the fortunes on lobbying, that should be supporting invention. Because when you get into a corporate environment, ultimately, we've seen it over and over again, the ingenuity, the spark, the willingness to just be adventuresome disappears, and people get into just plodding back and forth. Jerry believed that there needed to be that spark of innovation, the freedom and independence that an inventor had made all the difference in the world. And the only way you can be an inventor in these times and in most times, you had to be an eternal optimist. No matter how bad things were, Jerry was always an optimist. He'd get up every morning and never look back. And just to illustrate some of the difficulties, I mean, these companies were so bad during our time period, and the courts would allow these litigations to free run. Companies took 4,300 pages of testimony from him, almost 50 days of depositions, just to grind him down during the time when he was ill. So it's a very unfair kind of system, so you have to be an optimism, be optimist. He felt the role of the inventor was paramount. These things, it's not for any reason that we know the Edisons, the Wright brothers. There's always somebody that's, even though these things are a product of oftentimes many underlying ideas, there's that spark of genius from some key people that really light the way and also serve as the inspiration for others. And that's what Jerry wanted, and what he wanted with this foundation was he wanted inventors to be role models, to be like the football stars, the baseball stars, people that they could look up to, recognize, and say, I want to be like that.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about maybe people don't know the breadth of Jerry's inventions, and maybe you could talk about a little bit about that, and then also maybe just describe ones like maybe machine vision or flexible manufacturing system
Okay, we'll give it a try.
in some degree, a little short detail.
Well, that was the most stunning thing I found when I met him. I mean, it was a surfeit of riches. You didn't know what to do, and it was very difficult to focus. He had at that time, I think when I first met him, maybe 300, 250 patents, something of that sort, but he had hundreds of patent applications. And he was so prolific that every day he would come up with something else. But toys, because it gave the opportunity for an inventor to really realize income, because the toy companies, you couldn't invent a toy by some methodical process. You had to have somebody that was just innately creative, so the toy companies dealt with a lot of independent inventors. And he came up with the car with a flywheel where you'd roll it across the floor and then drop it on the floor and off it would go. Hot Wheels was incredible, the flexible track, the faces on cereal boxes. So he had many things in the toys areas. But I recall after coming to represent him that I got a call from B.F. Goodrich and said, we're very interested in a patent that Mr. Lemelson has on igniters for jet engines. I had never even been aware of it. There was then a group that called and said, we're a group of medical doctors, PhDs, we're doing research in brain cancer and treatment of it, and we were stunned, and one of them was a Nobel laureate, to discover that there was this patent in which there was a chemo drug that was encapsulated and was therefore not active, injected into someone, but if you radiated the spot where the tumor was, it would release the encapsulated chemo and treat the tumor. And I hadn't known about that one. But he also came up with semiconductor technology that was quite amazing. And one of the stories there that was very interesting to me, he'd seen the space capsule reentry, one of the early flights. When it came in, the way they kept it from burning up was that there was a material on the outside of the capsule that when heated to very high temperatures would turn to an oxide and create a thermal insulating barrier between the capsule and the air, and even though the temperatures would rise to 1,000 degrees or more, nothing would burn up. That triggered in his mind a problem in semiconductors, that you had to electrically isolate parts of the semiconductor from other parts. And he came up with, in situ, on site, a local oxidization of silicon, one of the primary techniques for creating miniaturized electronic circuits. I did ask him one time, I said, when I'm wallowing in it, like figuring out what to do about his patents. I mean, one of the first ones that we did license were facsimile machine patents. He basically understood that technology at a very early date, and we licensed the entire worldwide industry in that area. And I asked him, what do you think your best patents are? Because I couldn't go through 400 or 500 and make sense out of it. He said, I think my best ideas were machine vision and flexible manufacturing. And I knew nothing about machine vision or flexible manufacturing. And what machine vision obviously there was television that existed, so you could create images. There are computers, and this is in the 50s, the early 50s. They were in their infancy. And each was independently a technology that had value. But Jerry, as the cross-disciplinarian he was, saw that there was an important relationship, that you could extract information from images with a digital computer. And he went far beyond that, which that basic concept, other people had somewhat the idea, but would look at it in an analog way. But Jerry understood so much about manufacturing, about quality control, that about manufacturing things like placing components in printed circuit boards, that he then saw that, for example, pattern recognition. There were times then when you put components into a printed circuit board, people first did it manually because the boards were big. Then when they got progressively smaller, they had robotic arms that could pick up a part, move it to a place, and insert it. As the dimensions got progressively smaller, that was impossible. He recognized that you needed vision, and that he had a camera that then the arm would pick up, turn a component toward the camera. You'd sense the orientation of it. It would come down. On a printed circuit board, there were fiducials or reference marks. And these servos, which he didn't invent, but understood all of these things could be there, would move it within the width of a human hair to deposit it in the proper component, in the proper place. Well, you did this, pattern recognition was also human face recognition, fingerprint recognition. There were also things like inspection systems, no matter what it was. At that time, before his inventions, it was typical to sample productions, like Kodak with film or some other manufacturing. You'd pull out a sample, test it out of 1 out of 1,000 or 10,000, and presume that if it was okay, the other 1,000 or 10,000 were, which wasn't a very good assumption. But with machine vision, you now had the speed of light working for you. So there could be 100% inspection of everything. And inspection went across a full range of anything you could imagine. Because now you could look at, in pharmaceutical world, for example, you could look at a bottle to see whether it had foreign objects in it, whether labels were on straight, whether pills were cracked, whether inserts were in the box. And you do this at the speed of light. And therefore, inspecting every single item, and therefore what's called Sigma 6 quality, became possible. Ironically, right during the same time that he was inventing machine vision, he was also working on the notion of flexible manufacturing. And what was that? Well, Henry Ford had made the wonderful contribution of the production line. And it was famously said, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. And when computers came along, Jerry recognized the prospect that the computer gave the ability to now give you flexibility in manufacturing. And it probably wasn't well understood, but just as a simple example, VCRs, for example, video camcorder recorders. When we ultimately were involved in them in the 90s, there were hundreds of different models, hundreds of different kinds of circuit boards. Those circuit boards differed from one another in a relatively small amount, but there were different television systems around the world, and therefore you had to adapt them. There were different qualities, types, and so on. So there might be 200-300 different variations of these circuit boards. And you couldn't have 200 to 300 production lines. So as a practical matter, you had these sharp limitations on what you could do because of the practicality of the production line. Jerry said, well, if I control a computer, control a machine tool that now can flexibly put components in different places on a printed circuit board, with a computer, it can know, if it knows the board, it can know which components to put where. But he was confronted with the big problem is, how do I know what's coming? And thinking, machine vision had been something where he was looking for an unknown in an image. You'd have to search many times much of the image. You were looking for aberrational things, so the algorithms would be that. He then came up with the idea, instead of looking for an unknown, I'll put a known in a specific location on that device. And then since it's known, I can find it by location. But more importantly, he thought, well, I can have a basic code like the Morse code. And I can make these marks in high contrast, black, white, and so on. And as I scan across it digitally, which was much different, there are people that had come up, there's a guy, Woodland at IBM, that was credited with having invented the barcode. Jerry's stuff was patented over Woodland. Woodland was primitive, was ridiculous. But everybody, because he's a big company, they got credit for it. I had that same experience in representing a fellow in stereophonic sound in television. When they discovered that his stuff dominated in 13 tests out of 14, everybody's, all of the big companies, the RCAs, the Philips, the Nippons, they decided they'd have a retest, and they awarded the invention, and they awarded the credit for coming up with stereophonic sound to Zenith and an engineer there. Well, ultimately, I got over $100 million out of that industry because he was the inventor of it. But it's much the same way here on the barcode. Jerry recognized that through a digital handling of all of this, this was the technique, and that led to really barcoding, automatic identification, and more importantly, he recognized the implications of it. That that's what led to just-in-time manufacturing, inventory control. He understood all of those and claimed those very specifically. That's a long answer to a
Yeah, and I think that one of the lessons for the young inventors in the audience is to really think broadly and think about connecting ideas and technologies in areas that don't necessarily seem connected between a tiny silica chip and the space shuttle is a big distance, but not in your consciousness and in your way you understand something. So with Art, what was Jerry like personally when you first met? What struck you about him as kind of the inventor's personality?
Well, just let me sort of pick up what Jerry
Yeah.
just said. First of all, it's wonderful to hear this from the inside from you. And I got a whole new view of the barcode now because I'm not going to back down on that one anymore. But the whole idea of this goes to his personality, this Renaissance man quality that he has. That, to me, was one of the outstanding characteristics. You know, Leonardo has his codices and all of these things. Well, we're going to get those papers, right? We're still going to get the Jerry Lemelson papers, one of the best body of papers to document invention in the entire world.
Yeah, so we have an archive of my dad's where it's in 5 storage lockers. His notebooks themselves, because he would keep a notebook every day, are in multiple hundreds. And yeah, they're going to eventually come back to the Smithsonian.
You bet. The gold in this is the records are voluminous. I don't know how many running feet, but lots. The gold in it are these scientific notebooks, which are the equivalent, I'll say, of the Leonardo kinds of things. And what really stands out is it just brings out the interweaving of the mind, the technologies, the disciplines. And you look at these notebooks, he'll start with toy inventions, and the same kind of thing about materials will show up in some kind of, weapon system, something like that. They all fit together. So let's take the toys for a second, because that, I think, points out to a personality characteristic of him. When you saw Jerry, he's a very unassuming man, very humble and very polite, as you said, and he seemed very serious, but he was a man that kept the inner child alive in him. And play was very much what he was about. He wasn't just doing those toys because it was the easiest way to get a license. He genuinely loved toys, and he loved being around kids. One of the things we really treasured were those early moments when he came to the Lemelson Center and met with the hands-on kids in the hands-on group. And we've got some just wonderful footage of him meeting with them, and it was sheer delight to see him do this. The other thing is about this, and he had one of the characteristics that I think all great inventors have, this feeling that he could conquer anything through invention. He could do any invention. If you look at his library, I mean, I saw, specialized literature in physics in that library, and which he apparently monitored all the time when they went into his invention. It was just kind of an amazing thing that he felt he could do anything, and I think he could do anything, and he saw invention as really kind of conquering the world eventually. Now, just last night I was with our friends Hal and Betty Walker, and we were having dinner, and we got somehow into a conversation about he's sitting down here, is a laser specialist, and we were looking at laser propulsion to get us out to the stars. And I didn't know what the hell I was talking about, but I pretended, and I went along and acted as if I did. And I said, we got done. And I just sort of spontaneously said, God, I wish we had Jerry here, because we'd had this thing solved. And you know what? He would have solved that. So thanks for that help.
Yeah, thanks, sir. So Mom, looks like we're a bit over time. So if you could channel Jerry now and give a message to young people in the audience, what do you think Jerry would say to young inventors today?
Never give up. That's what he would say.
Right.
If you have something, see it through to the end. Because there'll be plenty of people there who will tell you, it's never going to work. How do you know it's going to sell? Why spend time doing this when you go out and get a job? Well, don't get the job. If you really have something, make it your prime focus. And don't come back and blame me if it doesn't work.
Okay. Okay, I think we're out of time. Thanks, Jerry, and thanks, Art and Mom.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Very good. You were wonderful.